Hello. Good morning. Welcome to my shed. You can call me Pendejo Way. I don't know if I'm gonna make any more videos after this, but if I do, that's the bit. This is my shed. I'm Pendejo Way. If you clicked on the video, I'm assuming you want to hear about this, but what I got to think about it. I don't know why you would, but I'm thankful that you do. If you don't know, this is George Miller, Joji, Filthy Frank, internet icon, freaking hip-hop star, lo-fi artist. He wrote this book as a sort of farewell to the character Filthy Frank, his thing from YouTube. And I picked it up about a month ago, and I finished reading it, and I immediately went online and bought the hardcover version because I wanted the nice version to have on my bookshelf. This is a good book. This is a really good book in my opinion. So much so that I went out on YouTube and I looked up reviews and I wanted to see people talking about it and like what they thought, and I wasn't getting what I was looking for, and so I figured I'm gonna put this out and hopefully some people vibe with this. Some people go out looking for this and this is what they want to see from this book. But yeah, I'm gonna, I guess, just tell you guys about this book first of all, like no spoiler review, and then I've got some notes here. I'm going to give like a brief summary of each chapter and kind of what I took away from it, how I think about it now having read the whole book, and then yeah, I'm just gonna give my full thoughts. The very end, like chapter 14, 15 are what I'm gonna talk the most about, I think, but I'm expecting this to take at least a half hour. But with that, I'm gonna leave that in. For sure. But with that out of the way, let's talk about this. I guess something I want to say about this book beforehand too is it's not meant to be, I think, the ending for what happened in the YouTube channel, because it's obviously very different. We don't have a real Frank and a fake Frank. There's a lot of stuff that happens on the YouTube channel that doesn't happen in this book, and vice versa. I think this was just George's way to say goodbye to this character, not maybe the way that was going to please the most fans, but the way that he liked the most. And I think I appreciate that, you know, that he didn't, like, because there are some parts in here that I was like, that would be cooler if he was done differently, but I think I respect that, you know, this guy he wanted to put the end to the Filthy Frank character in his way, and I think it turned out really good. I think it was a really good ending. So another thing, if you care about like technical aspects of books, like grammar, spelling, I mean, none of the paragraphs are indented. One of the paragraphs literally repeats twice, like 2 pages later. It's really, the quality of this book in that regard is not extremely high. So if that's something that'll make this book really hard to read, if that's something you care about. And it's already kind of hard to get through the first 7 chapters, I can't lie. But once I got to chapter 7, it was pretty quick. It was like I started really wanting to get into the story more. But without further ado, chapter 1. This is the filthiest story I've ever read, first of all. But we start with the midgets fighting over hummus in a random dimension, and it has nothing to do with the story. And I think it's appropriate that George started there, because I think he's telling us straight up, like, this doesn't mean anything. This has nothing to do with anything I've done before. I'm just making a funny story to say bye, you know? And I like that. So Frank's in the apartment. He's in his underwear. He's covered in phlegm, and Chin Chin shows up and steals his chromosomes. And afterwards, after Chin Chin leaves, the rest of the gang shows up. Alpha Centurion, Pink Guy, Salamander Man, Safari Man, and Drone. And they do this little bit where Frank is like, or it's like Alpha comes out and he's like, "Oh, Frank, man, I just missed it. I would have helped you." And Frank's like, "No, I saw you hiding, you pussy. Also, you owe me money." The same thing with Pink Eye, and it's you know, just one of those showing their dynamic where they're like they care about each other, but also it's like, no, you're like, I saw that you would have let me die, and I saw you hiding. Like they know each other, are kind of fucked off. But at the end of this chapter, Frank starts to question why all this stuff is happening. What's with Chin Chin? What are the Peace Lords? Who's God? And why is he the one chosen to have this power? And we're gonna get into that a lot later. But this part of the story actually happens way later in the book. This is one of those we start at the end or towards the end kind of things, because the second chapter is Frank's real origin, which is he was just a fetus, not born from anything, just a fetus, appeared in a dirty hole in Jakarta, Indonesia, and a family from a temple of 28 takes him in. They name him Franciscus. Filth, it means freed from filth in Indonesian in this realm apparently. But yeah, he's saved by this family, and they immediately see that he's a genius, like freaking 10 million IQ. He solves a bunch of problems for this village, makes him so cleanly they no longer have to circumcise the woman. Like, this is a big dub for this community. And so the military immediately is like, nice, we're taking that. So they jack him and they take him to this place in Okinawa run by a company called Suncorp. And Suncorp, friggin' hilarious, is Nazi funded. Basically, when Nazi Germany fell, Hitler left everything to Suncorp. So they're Nazi funded Japanese company that's doing research in Okinawa. And Frank is a German Japanese fellow in this book as well. So, you know, and this is 1945. So this is a kind of a strange facility he's going to be working at. Now, we get a little picture into Frank's mind at this, where we see his ideology is very black and white. He sees the world in very much, there's winners and losers. There's bullies and the bullied. There's leaders and followers. And almost every situation he's in, he views himself as the leader, as the bully, as the winner. He's that guy. He has a very high opinion of himself. And at this point, he hasn't really been challenged yet. So it makes sense that he thinks that way. And in hindsight now, it's like, we're going to see him get humbled later. And it's, you know, this is part of his character growth. You know, it was something I didn't think he would have, to be perfectly honest. But he also hates weebs, makes it very clear about that. And he has this helper named Ichiro, who he calls Bichiro. He treats him like shit. All Bichiro can do is say, "My name is Bichiro." That's all he knows how to say. And whenever Frank takes a shit and flushes it down the toilet, he looks at it and says, "Bye, Bichiro." And I think that just sums up his opinion on Bichiro right there, you know. But yeah. Also, we get into, like, Frank is really sadistic in this book. He tortures rats and animals, and it's a lot of shock value. But I think Frank doing this kind of stuff later on, it makes another moment in the book just feel a lot better, in my opinion, right? Now, at this point in the book, Frank starts getting kind of sick, and he thinks he has cancer. And when he looks at his blood under a microscope, he's looking to see if his cells are multiplying, but really it's his chromosomes. And you and I probably know that chromosomes are pretty important in this universe, but he doesn't know that yet, so he's scared. And also, Bichiro just starts splitting in half and hatching out of himself. And Frank just like sees it like, all right, cool, clean that shit up, and that's the end of the chapter. So, and also it just continues to happen. Like every week or so, Bichiro just hatches out of himself, and it's really messed up. But yeah, that's the end of chapter 2. And like I said, this chapter just we learn about Frank and his ideology, and we see he's kind of a messed up dude. And like I said, later on, there's going to be a moment where that comes back a little bit. But chapters 3 starts with the U.S. military showing up. So Nazi-funded Japanese lab with a genius German-Japanese researcher. Let's see what they try to do. Yeah, this guy named Sergeant Benson shows up, and he just starts fucking with Frank. He's like, show me everything you've got. And Frank is trying to hide the fact that he's got chromosomes that are multiplying. This guy's thinking he's working on nuclear weapons or something, Sergeant Benson, but Frank's just trying to hide chromosomes. But either way, Benson just starts flipping over the lab, and he's like, I'm gonna freaking get you. And so for the next like 2 months, once a week, he just shows up and just holds a gun to Frank's head and starts flipping the lab around. And this is, like I was saying, this is one of the first times Frank is getting humbled. That he's like in a position where he can't do anything. He's gonna die if he does. And so he just bides his time, holds on until 2 months later. This one night, Benson shows up and he's drunk, And he gets two janitors, puts them against the wall. He's like, all right, Frank, show me where are the documents. And Frank is like, no, dude, it's not going to happen. And Frank's like, I'm going to get those documents from you, Frank. Frank's like, yeah, that'll happen when pigs fly. And he laughs and he's like you'd ever fly. And Benson gets pissed and he's like, this is your fault. This is on you. And this is the first time Frank feels sorry that he has a quick mouth, because Benson shoots the two janitors and Frank is just, he's distraught after this. He's depressed. He doesn't know what to do, and he thinks he's dying from cancer. So he decides, you know what, I'm going to finish my research and I'm going to leave it for the next generation. Hopefully they do better. And that doesn't happen, because he starts going crazy and getting these weird images of whatchamacallit, numbers flashing through his head. And he one night just goes crazy in the lab with Bichero, and his wrist accidentally gets slit and he sprays blood everywhere and he's screaming the numbers, and then the walls start to shake apart, and he travels realms for the first time. And Bichero comes with him, kinda. The realm that they exist in just completely gets split apart and destroyed. It doesn't exist anymore. And Bichero, we don't know where he ends up until way later on. But Frank, he ends up in chapter 4 in an unfamiliar realm, really icy, just completely empty. And before we go on, I just wanted to again say, like, this last chapter was well, Frank, like, this is the start of his trials and tribulations. This is going to be the start of his suffering, and he has so much more suffering to go through. It's really rough, you know. But Frank is walking around this new realm in chapter 4, and he comes into Pink Eye, and Pink Eye is not the same Pink Eye we know in the videos yet. He actually can talk. He's completely coherent. And Pink Eye says that he was sent there by a higher power to bring revelation to Frank, and basically just tell him about the real like thing past what he knew before, right? He explains that the reality that they live in is split into 3 omniverses, and those omniverses each has tens of dozens of universes, which each universe is split into countless dimensions, and each dimension has any number of realms. And realms, I guess, are like the bottom. Like, we could consider what we live in a realm, I would guess, in this canon, right? Like New York, the rice fields, they're just all different realms in this. Later on, there's Fukui, which is in a different realm than I think the Fukui that Frank would have heard about in his realm originally, right? So realms are just, like, I would say, like, different timelines almost, maybe. But that's the best explanation we get. He just says what they are. He doesn't really go into detail. That was just me extrapolating. But then he also goes on to explain the tiers, and he starts at the bottom, which are the wretched. And where they're at right now in the book is not actually a realm. It's a space that exists between realms that is basically non-existent. So right now they don't exist technically, and they're nothing. And in this nothingness area is the wretched. These are souls that are damned to just, this is hell. This is actual hell, I would imagine. And that's the lowest form of existence. And right above them is the beasts. And the beasts are only above them because they're not getting tortured, because they don't have the consciousness to understand what they are. They just exist. And the wretched are, like, at least they're ignorant of their plight. Like, we actively are suffering. So they look at them and they're jealous, right? And then third tier, mortals, and that would be us. That would be Frank during his life and where he came from. And these people generally get left alone by the rest of the tiers because they're not really in tune with the omniverse like that. They stay in their realm. That's it. They don't know about the greater dimensions and universes and all that stuff. And above that is a rank and file, and this is basically just someone that has enough chromosomes to travel between realms, you know. And Pink Eye explains that chromosomes are, you know, form of power, and Frank is a little special because his have begun to multiply. He's the first person to rise from mortal to rank and file. Nobody's ever heard about it, and so it's causing a stir in the multiverse, the omniverse. The tiers are shifting, so to speak. But above that is a Chimpilla, which is just a step above a rank and file, I guess. Like, it's just someone that's got some real power in the omniverses. Maybe not a key player, but at the very least a player, you know. And then the next two tiers are shrouded in mystery at this point. I'm gonna just spoil a little bit, but it's Peace Lords above Chimpillas, and they're Frank is like, are Peace Lords good guys? I see peace in the name, and Pink Eye is like, no. It's like some Chimpillas are good and bad, and some are bad. Some Peace Lords are good, some are bad. They just all kind of do their thing in the Omniverse. But Peace Lords are very powerful beings, and above that is the ultimate god, which at this point Pink Eye seems to believe is Lord Chinchin, the Dark Lord. Chinchin, you know, like, and so, but he makes a clear point that the tiers are shifting, and Frank is looking, or Chinchin's looking for Frank because of it. Mostly because he wants to like just farm Frank's crumbs. He wants to use him. And Frank, at this point, after hearing all this, he says, "You know what? I want to meet with these Peace Lords. I want to meet with this god. I want to plead my case. I want to, like, why are they doing? What's the point of this? Why not just leave people alone? You know?" But Pink Eye's just like, "You know what? You need to get somewhere safe. Let me give. Here's the coordinates to somewhere safe. My job's done. I'm gonna stay here and die." And Frank is like, "No, you're coming with me, man. Like, I need you. Like, I don't know what it is, but we gotta go." And Pink Eye is like, "You know what? Let's do it. Let's make this happen." And so this chapter was just exposition. I don't think it was just to tell us about this, but I think it was also to kind of show us that Frank really is special. He's the first to do something which is impossible, which is go from someone who can't travel realms to someone. It's just, again, it's like, it would be like you or me, damn, being able to travel to a different dimension. Like, it's just, it's incredible. I don't know, but chapter 5 starts with Frank having like a brief, beautiful moment, and it's described that way, and it's you know, seeing how tumultuous his past has been till now. You know, it's funny how this is described, because he's really just face down in a swamp, and he wakes up choking, and he's like, all right, where's Pink Eye? He can't find him. He looks around, so he starts traveling around, and he runs into Lemon Man, and Lemon Man, after a back and forth, starts just beating him up. And Frank gets saved by Salamander Man, the boy, yes. He comes in, he saves him, and he first, you know, he's doing his thing, and Frank's like, what the hell? But he eventually understands him, and, you know, Pink Eye lets him know Lemon Man's not that bad, you just scared him. But they start traveling together, and they eventually find Pink Eye hung from a tree with shadows violating him, like literally, like, again, one of those brutal moments that Frank has to go through to really appreciate the ending of the book. But it's really rough. But they cut him down, and they shake him off, and they start traveling. And on their travels, they run into Negi Generation 4, aka Balderdash, or he's a Balderdash. He speaks and he goes like, "Roger that, ugly mountain cup," and it's supposedly something. Salamander Man's the only one that can understand him, so yeah, they just take his word for it. And then Pink Eye starts to explain that different realms, their time runs differently, because at this point Frank doesn't know how long they've been there. It could be days, weeks, months, years. They've been traveling a while, and Pink Eye explains that time is super relative in the realms, and in realms where there are less chromosomes, time is not as dominant, and it's controlled by time that is in realms that is more dominant to it, kind of. It's weird. He also explains that when they're in realms where time is dominant, their chromosomes can grow faster, but that also leads to them being around more powerful entities and possibly getting their chromes stolen. So it's just a interesting thing to point out. And Negi, out of nowhere, just starts making sense. He's like, go up the mountain, go up the mountain, go up the mountain. And then he goes back to being Negi, the Balderdash. And so they are like, well, that was something, maybe we should go up that mountain. And so they go up, and big mistake, Chinchin shows up. And at first, you know, Frank understands that he should be scared of him, but he's not. And Chinchin's like, ha, cute. And he slaughters Negi in front of them. And he's like, alright, you got one of two options. You can either die here, or you can go somewhere where your chromosomes will grow, and I'm gonna come and get them whenever I want. And Frank, in a true coward's fashion at this point, decides to do that. But this is the smart move, so I don't even get him on that. Chin Chin tells them to travel down the mountain, and they'll be transported by the time they reach the bottom. Well, they do go there. And when this chapter right here, that's the end of chapter 5, and you know, again, this is just getting more characters in and kind of getting us to this next area that we need to get to. Again, also just another moment of a really brutal moment that happens, that like later on, all these brutal moments that Frank has been through, it just leads up to the ending being that much more beautiful. So, you know, I feel like pointing them out when they happen. But yeah, chapter 6 starts with them waking up, and they're in New York now, and it's here that Pink Eye has started to become his YouTube video Pink Eye self. He's later on describes it as being completely understanding, coherent on the inside with a retarded shell. It's kind of funny, but they go around looking for a place to stay. They end up making some money by taking pictures with tourists. They like think they look funny, so they want pictures with them, and they end up at a Japanese restaurant where they run into a certain man in a safari hat. You guys might know him. Wow, Frank! Wow! Like, anyway, Safari Man comes in and explains, well, you know, he ends up talking to Frank, and he explains that, yeah, you know, I'm a rank and file too, and I know some way that we can get some chromosomes, and illegal crawfish racing happens, and he explains to Frank that he knows some suckers that they can get easy chromosomes out of. He's so confident that they're gonna get out of there with at least 2 million chromosomes, that if they go out there with less than that, Frank can have Safari Man's apartment. So Frank agrees immediately, and illegal crawfish racing happens just like it did in the dang YouTube video. He brings out actual rats, and Alpha Centaurion actually steals the chromosomes at one point, but Frank gets them back, but as a gesture of goodwill leaves him with 1,000. And this is funny because then at the end, Frank is like, hey, Safari Man, unfortunately for you, you lost the bet. You said I'd have 2 million chromosomes, and I've only got 1,999,000. And Alpha Centurion's like, wait, but Frank, and Frank's like, shh, like, you're a man of your word, right, Alpha? It's pretty funny. But then, you know, Frank goes on to a speech where he's like, you know what, we're brothers. I want to share this apartment equally till I tell you to get the fuck out. And it's just one of those things. But yeah, they smack bottoms and backs and nuzzle thighs, and they have a good time. And, you know, this is one of those things where, like, Frank gets this little bit of respite in between the suffering, and it's nice, you know. But next chapter, chapter 7, is where things get really good, in my opinion. We start with Negi Generation 1. We don't know why, but it explains the Negis a little bit, and this Negi, for some reason, wants to go up a hill. So he starts going up a hill. And then we get back to the gang, and they're trying to get out of the realm they're in because Chin Chin is on the way. They smell sulfur. He's coming. And so they, through some shit, they end up getting chased by cops into the sewer, and that's where they end up traveling. And it's really gross because they sink into the sewer water, and the description of, you'll see. Like, honestly, if you are not good with that kind of thing, I would skip this part of the book. But they actually accidentally travel, so the realm they travel to is technically 2 realms with the same coordinates, and they travel to one that is like hell, actual hell, and Negi digs them out of it, and he explains to them, like, no, we're actually in the same coordinates. That one, you just accidentally went to that one. And they get mad because Safari Man is the one who had the coordinates, and they're like, they don't believe it almost. They're like, are we sure Safari Man didn't fuck up? They really don't like Safari Man this chapter. It's really funny. But they start to travel with Negi, and he's explaining the Negis to them, and there's these like Negis that are looking for Frank. They're all asleep. There's like a field of them, but they fear Chin Chin, and Chin Chin has put out a bounty on Frank, so they try to not wake these Negis up, and they fail. And this starts the Great Negi War, and all the gang is heroically fighting these Negis. They're just beating them up, except for Safari Man, who goes and runs away and hides in a cave. And then this ends with one of the best callbacks to Filthy Frank ever, which is he grabs a clock and he slams on the guys. It's time to stop, and it's just this is the first showing of Frank's power as a growing rank and file. Like this is like he's starting to almost be a chimpilla at this point, and this is where it starts to like speed up a little bit. But they've won the war and they leave Safari Man behind for being a coward, and immediately after that Chin Chin shows up and he sees Safari Man and he kidnaps him, and he makes a remark on Frank's power. He tells him that like I felt that reverberate across the omniverses. That was not normal. Like that was a display of power. So we're even seeing Chin Chin acknowledge that Frank is truly and wholly really powerful now, at least a little bit, you know. But the gang is traveling and they eventually get stopped by a chimpilla named Gitsin, who first he just splits the gang up. He sends them all different places, and he tells Frank that he's gonna get coordinates to go somewhere on the next day, and he's got to go there. And it's brutally given to Frank. Negi Gen 1 gets brutalized, and the coordinates are carved into his body. It's really sucks, but Frank takes the coordinates and he travels. And again, this is one of those, within one chapter they had a very like awesome moment where Frank was like, I'm getting powerful, and then he was again immediately humbled and forced back into subservience to Chin Chin. And I think it's just again appropriate, just Frank like being put back in his place. And later on, keep saying, you know, it makes the ending feel a lot like better in my opinion. But chapter 8 starts with Frank in the new realm, and he meets Red Dick, who tells him that Chin Chin sent him here to help Frank get more chromosomes, and they first do this by trying an eating competition, and they lose. And they try to come up with a bunch of different ideas. They talk about the sacrifice videos, which is hilarious. Now, if you were made a sacrifice, you're canon. But eventually they just steal blood from a children's hospital, which is really fucked up. But, you know, they got Chin Chin, his chromosomes, you know. And he tries and fails to hide his chromosomes. He tries to hide them in him, but Chin Chin's like, no, I can get those too. So Frank is left pretty powerless. Chin Chin gives him minimal chromes and sends him to the rice fields. And they get that line, welcome to the rice fields. Like, it's pretty funny. But he's traveling through the rice fields, and he runs into these creatures called Tatums, or he's warned about these creatures, and he thinks they're chimpillas. I don't know if they are or not, but he kills them all. And then later on he runs into a centipede chimpilla that tells Frank that he needs to end himself, essentially, to have this all stop. Like, if he just kills himself now, a lot of suffering will just stop. And Frank is like, no, I'm a chimpilla now. And this thing's like, you don't even know what a chimpilla is. But Frank does end up killing it. And this is kind of, I think, at least solidifies that he's actually becoming a chimpilla at this point, or is, if not at the very least a weak one, which is Frank's starting to get strong. And after killing him, he feels strong, and he continues on to the beach, where he sees an island, and he's called to it. You know, he's like, something's telling him, Frank, come. So he rose to the island, and that's the end of chapter 8. And, you know, chapter 8, I mean, this is mainly about getting him to the rice fields. I think, you know, we get a little funny thing where we get him, you know, we get a reference to the sacrifice videos. But, you know, this chapter, again, was mainly about getting Frank to the rice fields, and also kind of showing that he is getting a little strong now, right? But chapter 9 starts with Frank at the island, and he... Alright, sorry about that. That was my roommate, but he gave me one of these Fairlights. I'm really excited about it. But Frank's on the island, right? We just left him behind. He's on the island, and he starts climbing up this hill, right? At the top, he meets this tree kind of peace lord, I think. And this tree, first of all, knows everything, apparently. He talks to Frank about a lot of stuff. He tells Frank that he's, you know, important, and he tells Frank that there's a way for him to hide his chromosomes from Chin Chin in order to stay strong, and this is by giving them to people rather than taking them away. You see, when you give someone chromosomes, those chromosomes can't be taken anymore. And so this tree, Peace Lord, like lives in this land. You see, he's connected to a tree, and he's basically, the entire land, the entire island is ruled by his chromosomes, energized by them, I guess is the way to say it. And so he teaches Frank this technique, and then Frank kind of just asks him, like, who's God? What is God? And this tree at least tells him that if Chin Chin was a god, he wouldn't need Frank's chromosomes. And that's a very, like, important thing to know, right? Chin Chin wants Frank to use his chromosomes, and God wouldn't do that. So, you know, that's just something to note there. But Frank, oh my god. Alright, I'm gonna re-record this part, but Chapter 9 starts with Frank on the island, and he feels inclined to climb up this hill. And at the top of this hill, he sees this tree. And as he gets closer, he sees, it looks like a dude is crucified onto it, but really he's connected with the tree. He's like, the tree is wrapped around him almost. And as he gets close to it, it says his name, it says Frank, and it explains that this tree knows everything. Now the tree isn't God, it doesn't think it's God, it doesn't know if it is God, and it's kind of scared to be God. But the tree just, it kind of tells Frank it knows everything, it's a higher understanding. And it tells Frank that he has a higher purpose, that he needs to keep moving forward, and things will work out. And he explains to Frank that, because Frank asks him if Chin Chin is God, and he replies, if Chin Chin were God, he wouldn't need your chromosomes, you know, like, that was just so beneath God. He also tells Frank that, like, even though right now Frank feels kind of weak, you know, Frank, the only way that he can travel realms is with coordinates given to him by people he doesn't trust, and this tree is telling him, like, listen dude, your chromosomes are growing. Soon enough you'll be at a point where you can find chromosome or coordinates without even thinking about it, you know. So he's kind of implying to Frank that Frank's gonna get stronger, he just needs to be patient. And after they talk, Frank falls asleep, and he wakes up to Deo Patera, another Peace Lord, and he killed the tree. And he tells Frank, what is it? He tells Frank to wait there for Chin Chin, and Frank, he thinks he's already a dead man at this point, so he just kind of, okay, let me try this one more time. So chapter 9, Frank's on the island, and he sees a hill, and he decides to climb it. And as he gets up to the hill, he sees this tree, and on this tree is a man. He looks kind of crucified on it, but he's really like one with the tree. And once Frank is close enough, the man, seemingly a Peace Lord, starts talking to Frank. He starts telling him, you know, I know you, I know everything. The tree knows everything. Frank asks it if it's God, but that's the one thing it doesn't know. It just knows, it doesn't know why. It just knows that it doesn't know, and it's kind of scared to even be God, you know. But he goes on to tell Frank how his chromosomes are growing, and you know, Frank is a little, like, he's down, he feels weak right now at this point, and the tree tells him, like, dude, listen, you may be weak now, but with enough chromosomes, you can do wonders. You know, you're on your way there, essentially. Not in those words, though. But then Frank asks if Chin Chin is God, and the tree says something very, I think, important, which is, if Chin Chin were God, he wouldn't need Frank's chromosomes, just outright. So I think that's a very interesting thing to know. I'm pretty sure Pink Guy said that earlier in the book, but as well, But then he also goes on to tell Frank that there is a way that he can hide his chromosomes from Chin Chin, and that's by sharing them with other people. You see, when you share chromosomes, it hides them, and it makes them untouchable to those who would try to steal them. This Peace Lord is seemingly one with the island that he inhabits. Everything on the island has his chromosomes. He gives and takes as he pleases, and this is his shelter from his identity. And he tells Frank that he has a higher purpose and that he needs to move forward and believe in himself. And this is a very important moment, I think, for Frank. This is a restful moment. And Frank falls asleep. And this nice restful moment is once again immediately led to a moment of Frank being humbled, because another Peace Lord, Diopatera, shows up, and he cut down the tree and tells Frank, wait for Chin Chin. He's gonna be here soon. And Frank, considering himself already a dead man, decides to leave anyway, because Chin Chin's gonna kill him at one point or another anyway. Might as well do what I want. And so he just keeps traveling, and he finds a stream and some salmon in the stream, and he picks up a dead one, and he thinks about what the tree was saying about giving chromosomes, and he begins to give it chromosomes and brings it back to life. And then he starts giving and taking, and he thinks it's funny, and then he eats some salmon and he sucks one dry of its chromosomes, and he keeps on traveling. And then he's stalked by what's seemingly a beautiful woman, and she's just really trying to get at him, trying to get him to stop there and stay. But Frank, he's on a mission. He has to go, so he's like, no, I'm leaving. And the woman ends up being a Peace Lord, or a Chimpilla actually, and she wants to stop Frank, but Frank beats her. He's now like a pretty strong Chimpilla, and he at this point has enough chromosomes that he doesn't need to cut himself with blood and let his blood out anymore. He just instinctively travels to a new realm. And so Frank is he's getting seemingly close to Peace Lord status at the end of this chapter. But yeah, this chapter was again incredibly important for exposition, for like lore, behind everything, with that whole tree Peace Lord, but then also with Frank learning this ability to give chromosomes. It's very important later on. And when we go to chapter 10, and Frank arrives in Fukui, but a strange one, not the one that would have been from his original realm. And he runs into Percy the pigeon, who dumps on him for trying to eat one of his eggs. And it's really funny later on, but Frank eventually, he catches some fish and he gives some to Percy, and Percy and Frank end up being friends. And let's see, Frank, he travels to a farm, and he ends up staying with this farmer couple who are like dead technically, but they're still moving. It's weird. It's very strange. But he stays with them for a few weeks until he visits the marketplace with them, where he sees Percy selling, wouldn't you believe it, chicken eggs. And there's this whole thing with Percy where he draws a line at eating his own thing, but everything else is fair game. And Frank tries to point out the hypocrisy, but Percy just always is like, no, it's different, my thing's different, I'm conscious that they're animals. Like it's really funny. But he also, while he's in the market, he finds Salamander Man's recorder. Now this is huge. So he goes to find who sold it to the merchant there, and it ends up being Dr. Sack. And if you remember Dr. Sack, he's nothing like he is in the book. In the book, he's either really nice or get off my property. And the way he changed, it's kind of like Launch from Dragon Ball, where she sneezes and she goes from being blonde and killer to blue-haired bimbo. This guy is nice Dr. Sack to killer Dr. Sack every time the wind touches his hair. So I don't know why I just wanted to bring that up, but yeah, he tells Frank the coordinates of where he got the recorder, and then when Frank heads out, Percy tries to go with him, but just a little too late. So this chapter was just to get him back to the gang, I think, or at least get him back onto his travel to them, mostly. It also was again a little bit of a nice time for Frank. the time he spent with the farmers. I mean, he makes it a point to tell Percy, like, tell the farmer and his wife I said bye, you know, like, or thank you at the end. And so, like, his character development for Frank, like at the beginning of the book, Frank was very, again, just black and white. People are good or bad, and you know, now he didn't really care about anyone besides himself, and now he's, you know, made friends that he cares about, and even these, you know, random farmer and wife he spent 2 weeks with, he cares enough to, like, tell them I said, you know, thank you. And again, it's just character development from a character I did not expect to get developed at all, you know. And so Frank travels and he sees Percy. He has one of Percy's feathers. That's it. That's all that made it through with him. But he's in what's the pre-wretched realm, which explains to him is that this is the place where the people who are condemned to be the wretched go, and they get impaled on these spikes and have to spend millions upon millions of years slowly but surely moving down the spike and then eventually dying just to get to the wretched, and then still suffer worse. It's really terrible. And here he meets Salamander Man's uncle, who explains to him that, yeah, Salamander Man, you know, sold the recorder because he basically used to visit him every million years or so to play the recorder for him. And he finally told him, like, hey man, sell the recorder so that you can help your friend. You know, I'm basically dead, but your friend still has a chance. And that's how the recorder got out. And Frank decides that if Salamander Man is going to come visit every once in a while, I'm going to sit here and wait for him. And he waits for 2 million years, during which time his chromosomes multiply. And he's woken up by Salamander Man, and at first he's like, he sees it, and it's like he sees him bathed in light, and it's beautiful, and it's a great moment for Frank. He's seeing his friend again, but then he stands up and he gets his composition back, and then Salamander Man is brutalized. He's bloodied and beaten and cut up, and it's so awkward for Frank and Salamander Man that we never even find out why he ended up like that. And again, this is just one of those moments where Frank had a good moment immediately, kind of like shit on, and you know, but he gives him the recorder, and Salamander Man plays a beautiful tune for his salamander uncle, who happens to die right there. It's you know, it's actually a sad part in the book. I didn't think I'd care about these characters this much, you know. But yeah, they where I was at, sorry. He says that the gang is in New York. So Salamander tells Frank that, you know, the gang's in New York, they're there. And Frank, you know, he's now Peace Lord for sure. He gets them there. And he no longer has to bleed. They're in New York, and this is where, so they travel, and then I'm assuming there's time spent in New York before what happens next. This is where I think possibly the YouTube canon could have happened, because they go to New York and then it starts at the beginning of the book with Frank being asleep and then being woken up by Chin Chin. And I'm assuming he's been in the apartment for a little while at this point. So this is like the only place I could imagine that the YouTube canon happens. They Salamander Man they go back to New York from the, you know, pre-wretched realm, and then they spend some time there before Chin Chin comes to take Frank's chromes, right? Well, the events happen like in the beginning of the book. Chin Chin takes the chromosomes, the gang shows up, but something different. Frank, after Chin Chin leaves, goes, alright guys, give me back my chromosomes. Yep, he hid his chromosomes within the gang. He still has them. He's still ready to take on Chin Chin, but he, more importantly, wants to meet God. Now this chapter 11, was it was tough to read, specifically the Salamander Man part, but this is like Frank is no shit powerful within the Omniverses now, and this is what I was waiting for throughout the book. Like when I saw real Frank show up in the YouTube videos, like I was like, I can't wait to read that in the book. Like what kind of training arc is he gonna go through? And he just sleeps for 2 million years, and passively his shit gets stronger, but he also trained, he learned how to give those chromosomes that multiplied within him. So this was one of those things. It was almost like an anime training arc to a certain degree. But we get to chapter 12 after that, and Frank pulls a prank on the boys, and he throws a rat at them, and Alpha Centaurion ends up beating it to death. And there's this whole thing, but Frank picks it up and in front of them brings it back to life, right? And the gang's all like, "What did you just do, Frank?" And Frank, without even saying anything, grabs Pink Guy and Salamander Man, and he takes them back to the hill that they walked up where they first met Chin Chin. And he finds Negi's body, and he puts it back together, and he brings Negi back to life. He believed that was like 8 chapters ago, and he still remembered Negi. It's just nice. Frank really cares about these people. And then Chin Chin arrives, and it's a huge thing. It's a standoff. Frank thinks to himself, like, what I'm about to say is gonna well and truly shift the tiers in the universe. Up till now, Chin Chin showing up meant we were doing his bidding. The words that come out of my mouth are gonna reverberate through the omniverses. And he looks at Chin Chin and he says, "Piss off." And Chin Chin leaves. I just think that's the funniest way to put it. But yeah, Frank is a contender in the omniverses now. He's a Peace Lord for sure, and Chin Chin can't just tell him what to do anymore. His chromosomes are multiplying faster than anyone can account for at this point. And so this next chapter, chapter 13, starts really strange. It says psychics can see the color of time and it's blue. And Frank is like in this weird dream sequence where he's in Japan and he's traveling through time, right? He's not physically there. He's just within the time that's there. It's very strange. But he sees his friends, and then he sees Diopatera come, and he sees him say, "Tell Frank to go back to wherever the hell hole he came from, or else," and he kills Pink Eye. And this scares Frank to his core. He wakes up from a dream, but Frank is scared, and he decides, like, even though Pink Eye does show up, he sees it's actually just a dream. He still decides and says, like, yeah, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna run away. I can't. He's gonna accept being banished. And Prometheus walks in and he says, "Listen, the Omniverse has been talking. You're a Peace Lord now. I want in, Frank. Like, I wanna be part of this." And they bring up Frank's potential and all this stuff. Frank's like, "I don't know, if I can hang with that." But they're like, "Frank, listen." Well, he explains to them, like, "Listen, there are tiers even within the Peace Lords. Like, y'all don't understand. Like, I may be a Peace Lord, but I'm not that guy. But, I don't know if I can ever even hang with them." But they tell him, like, "Dude, you were a mere mortal just a few chromosomes ago, and now you're a Peace Lord. Imagine what's going to happen in a few chromosomes. There might be tiers above God. You don't know, right?" They don't say that, but that's beyond the point. Like, the chapter ends with it just being a normal ending. It was a very not quick chapter, but the beginning blue time sequence was very strange, and this is again just a chapter to kind of humble Frank and kind of force him to make the wrong decision, which is to run away from his problems. And that's what he does in chapter 14. He enters isolation. He decides he's going to only exist in realms that have no life, except for one problem. The Peace Lords come and try to kill him, and they start chasing him from realm to realm, dimension to dimension. He keeps jumping. One or more, or all of them are all there. He can find no peace. And Percy comes in to try to help him. See, when Frank got Percy's feather, their chromosomes connected, and so when Frank's chromosomes multiplied, so did Percy's, and Percy became a Peace Lord when Frank became a Peace Lord. And so he's here helping Frank fight off the other Peace Lords, but it's just not good enough. And so he sacrifices himself so that Frank can get away, and Percy takes a bullet to the chest, and Frank gets away to seemingly a dimension of nothing. And out of nowhere, a rocket with Bichiro strapped to the front of it, and he just keeps splitting in half and popping out, and splitting in half and popping out, passes by. And Frank feels very little for it until he sees it coming back, and he notices that he's stuck in a black hole. But this is not any ordinary black hole. This black hole is a Peace Lord that they've got him. They got him. The Peace Lords show up. It's Chin Chin. He's got, it's Deo Patera, Octafarius, some shit. He's got Peace Lords, and they're gonna try to kill him. And then they immediately turn to stone. And then actual God shows up. Actual freaking God. Now, when I say actual God, I mean what I imagine is the stand-in for George himself. God explains to Frank that he is special and that he's gonna do God's work. And Frank's like, no, I'm filthy. I'm not the one to do your work. And he's like, I've always done my work through the filthy. You know, you're special. I'm telling you, you're part of that. And Frank just starts asking him all these questions about, you know, why would God let evil happen? And, you know, God brings up a good point of how would you have known good if you'd never seen evil? How would you know love if you've never seen hate? How would you know of any good without bad? And, you know, this is why I brought up all these moments earlier on where Frank has gone through trials and tribulations, and just the most wretched and filthy situations make the moments where he's able to have a beautiful moment, even though he's face down in a swamp. You know, he's able to have a nice couple weeks in Fukui, helping a farmer and his wife. You know, this restful moment where he lays his back against a tree and feels fully and truly rested. The appreciation of these moments, as when you compare them to Sergeant Benson tearing up the lab, Negi being brutalized, Pink Guy hanging from a tree, you know, Salamander Man's uncle, you appreciate the good so much more when you've gone through so much filth. And, you know, God, you know, as much questions as Frank has, God tells him, listen, man, you don't freaking know even the slightest bit of what it is I do. The omniverses, the three that you know, are my chalice. And my chalice, there are many chalices in my sitting room, and there are many rooms in my house. Like, you couldn't even comprehend how many realms there are out there that are pure and good and full of light, but you can't go there yet. You have to see what this is through to the end. You know, right now in the omniverse there is disorder, and it must be seen in all its filth and all of it. And then when it's finally been done, order will be returned. And after he explains all this to Frank, he gives him gifts. And the first he gives him is peace, freedom from fear. Not that he's forgotten his fears, but that they no longer are of any concern to him. And then he gives him forgiveness, the ability to forgive him, or forgiveness for all the filth that he's done, for the torturing of rats, for the stealing of chromes from beating Bichiro, all these things. He's forgiven for his filth. But forgiveness comes with a challenge, because you see, you can't just accept forgiveness. You have to give it. And, you know, when he gets this gift, Frank breaks down crying, because he does forgive all the Sergeant Benson, Chin Chin, all these people that have wronged him. He forgives them, because once you've truly forgiven yourself for all your wrongdoing, you see that you need to forgive others to really, you know, feel good at the end of it all. But after that, you know, he gives him hope and joy and what's next? Power. True power. Up till this point, Frank has been like a little fish or big fish in a small pond, but now he really understands what it means to be powerful. And I'm pretty sure God just made him the strongest being in this, whatever 3 omniverses he resides within. Like, he's probably just going to be the man in control at this point. He gives him providence, telling him that he'll always be provided for. And the last thing he gives him is love. Uh, this is unironically one of my favorite interpretations of God I've ever seen. And, you know, this super Jesus, Moses, like, just, you know, I love it. I think this is, you know, this really touched me personally, you know. And Frank, the forgiveness one really got me, because you just see it. He's like, when you read it, he says he falls to the floor sobbing uncontrollably. You know, he's been forgiven, and that touches him. But it also, he has to forgive others, and that's hard. You know, I went through something like that last year, and, you know, it's tough. It's very relatable. So, like, that's why I find it hard to believe that this book has no meaning. But also, it's George, so who knows? He could have just put all this in here to make people like me think he was meaning something a lot more. But with this, God, you know, sends him back after, you know, actual literal Deus Ex Machina. Sends him back to the apartment with the gang, and, you know, sends him off to spread his message to the filthy and to the downtrodden. And it's I liked it a lot, you know. Even though it was literal Deus Ex Machina, it's the point of this book was not for Frank to beat the Peace Lords. The point of this book was for Frank to be right with himself. And this last chapter, you know, really goes into that. You know, he has his final talk with the boys, and he, you know, Percy is there, and Percy's like, yeah, no, I got shot in the chest, but Frank saved me. And Frank admits, like, it wasn't me that saved you. I'm like, well, if it was, who was? And the only person he could think it'd be would be the God he met, but he just doesn't know how to explain it to them, you know. And I mean, he wonders himself if even that was God, or if that was just a higher level of, you know, Peace Lord that just wanted to put him in his place, rather than through violence, through a peaceful, by making him think that he loved him and all these things. And, you know, Frank eventually decides that worrying about these things isn't helping him in any way, shape, or form. It's just sucking. And he has the opportunity right now. He's powerful enough to protect his friends forever. He has the opportunity right now to just enjoy his time with them. And so he looks at them and he says, a friend saved you, Percy. And Pink Guy and Prometheus, or I believe, are the two that kind of notice that Frank really means himself when he says this. And Frank comes to the conclusion that he is God. He's his own God. He's in control of his life. And, you know, this book really, you know, this book I think is good for people who need that help with that message, to show that, you know, yeah, there are some things out of your control, but you can still be in control of your life if you have the right mindset. So, I don't know, but after the final chapter, we're shown or at least there's a prologue / epilogue. I'm not sure if you were supposed to read it beforehand, but this book was in canon of the universe written by Negi Generation 1. And so the prologue starts with Negi given a vision by God. He's told to write down everything, not leave anything out, and not add anything more to it. And he's given a scroll and a pen, and he's shown the vision. And in round 1, we see a boy born from darkness, and he's raised by these kings, one with a sword and one with a gun. And he becomes filthy, right? He becomes a little wretched, but he's eventually found by a pink creature of sorts, and the pink creature, you know, saves him and raises him. And eventually the boy finds this white room, and in the white room, you're God. You just do whatever you want. And the pink creature explains that the white room is simultaneously useless and almighty. See, when you're in the white room, everything outside of the white room can't affect you, but you can't affect it, right? And so while you're in there, you're God, but you're just God of yourself, essentially. Like, you don't have control over anything else except for what's in the white room. And the only people who have access to it are those who've experienced the greatest pain of all, which is love. And some stuff happens, and then we're seeing the boy at trial. He did some stuff in the white room he wasn't supposed to, And so he's sentenced to be executed. But the pink creature says, "Stop! No, you don't understand. He was raised poorly. He was corrupted. Please give me a chance. Give me access to the White Room." And so he's given access. And in the White Room, he essentially collapses every omniverse onto the White Room and creates a Big Bang. And when we see after the Big Bang is a new baby in a rice field, and the pink one comes and grabs him. And we hear about the few, the many, and the very few. And the few are those that claim to remember the first universe. The many are those that don't. And the very few are those that actually do remember the first universe. And so the pink guy goes to the very few, and he gets gifts from them, and he gives them to the boy, the baby, but he sees that there's still leftover malice within the baby that just could not be purified. And so then there's a random vision that's shown, and this vision is only 2 paragraphs long, but it supposedly happened before and after these other 2 universes. And it's a god that creates a perfect world, but the inhabitants don't like him. So he goes down and he has a child with one of them, and things still aren't going the way he wants, so he decides to destroy his creation. But then he's so upset with himself that he decides to destroy himself, and that creates the omniverses. And 2 products of this. One, his essence goes and seemingly becomes the tree Peace Lord that we saw earlier in the book. He says that it goes to the edge of the omniverses and becomes a tree on an island. And so I think that's the explanation of why that tree just knows everything. It's just leftover fragments of God. But also, the boy would live. The baby that he produced could not be destroyed, and that's seemingly the boy that we heard about in this. We've heard about earlier. He's known as the boy who's lived twice a million lives. Well, then we're shown this sequence where the pink creature has all these boxes, and each box is meant to be opened at a specific time. One of the boxes, when the boy opens it, it's given to it by the pink guy, the pink creature. 2 kings pop out, and these kind of remind the boy of something. His first universe, right? One of the kings comes out like, "Oh, second time around." The other one's like, "I knew you'd be here." And the pink guy tries to take it away, but in doing so, he accidentally shows the boy the most well-adorned box. And the boy wants to open that box, but it's not time yet, but he really wants to. And so the pink creature folds, and he opens it and sees his destiny, the little boy. And because he opened it at the wrong time, the destiny has changed, and the pink creature tries to take it back, but the boy wants it, and they begin to fight. And eventually the creature, in what's called the ultimate act of love, takes the boy. He slaughters him for the greater good of the omniverse, and everyone bows down to him. And then Negi goes on to say that, I say that blessed are those that can see the message that is being told here, grace and peace across the tiers. And I think I don't know what to really think about the epilogue and prologue. It doesn't really make sense with the book. The 2 universes that are shown. I mean, the pink creature seemingly is the main character, not the boy, which I'm assuming is a stand-in for Frank. I think it might be an allegory to George feeling like he has to kill the character of Frank. But either way, what I really liked about this book was that I think it was not only a send-off for the fans, but also for George to say goodbye to the character. It reminded me of the end of the Sassy the Sasquatch show, where Big Les, we find out, was rewarded with his own heaven for letting himself die at the end of the Big Les show. And you know, in this book, Frank is rewarded for choosing to, you know, accept exile in order to protect his friends and fighting the Peace Lords by God with his own heaven and his, you know, he's peace and love and forgiveness and providence and power and all these things. He's given him space to be with his friends and to not worry anymore. And you know, I think George just wanted to leave his character with, like, I'd imagine, you know, in this fictional universe, they're still bumping around, smacking backs and bums and nuzzling thighs and doing all those things, you know. But no, yeah, this book, I like this book a lot. I hope you read it. But yeah, I love you. Bye.